Hello and welcome to this week's video. My name is Anuska Taylor. Thank you so much for joining me. Now, on today's video, if you have ever considered voice coaching or voice training, but you've never dipped your toe in the water and maybe your extent of voice coaching is watching some videos on YouTube, and there's no judgment there because you're watching my videos. But I want to talk a little bit about what you might expect when you work with me. Now, of course, I can't talk for every voice coach out there. There are some overlaps, of course, in terms of what I do and what others do, but my particular approach is quite unique. So I want to share a little bit about what you can expect if you do book a private session with me. Just to remember that you can book a one-off Reclaim Your Voice session if you have a particular event coming up and you want some support, or if you just want to see what it's all about before you make the bigger investment, because my bigger investment is an 8-month program. But essentially, it's the same idea, whether you book the 1 hour or the 8 months. It's obviously over 8 months, I can go a lot deeper, we can go a lot further, but fundamentally, it's the same idea, it's the same approach. So I wanted to share this with you because I get asked this all the time. And I understand it's this minefield. People call themselves speaker coaches, voice coaches, public speaking coaches. And I know it's really a semantic minefield. So you really have to know what it is that you're looking for to find the right person. And then you can ask the right questions. Don't just go by what the person calls themselves, because it is an unregulated industry. You can basically call yourself whatever you like, and there are no laws against it. So this isn't to scare you, but it's just really to empower you to know what it is that you really need and then find the right person and ask the right questions. So from my perspective then, my work is not about presentation skills, public speaking skills per se, although yes, because your voice is the primary tool for delivering your presentation. Of course, when you work on your voice, it's going to impact your presentation skills, your public speaking skills. But there are people out there that literally will just work with you on your stage presence, on what do I do with my hands, what do I do with my eyes, where do I look, how do I engage with an audience, how do I craft my presentation, how do I craft my story. So that's not what I do. My work is all about the voice, everything you could possibly want to know about your voice. And as I said, your voice is the primary tool for delivery. And so it's really important, whether you're telling a story or whether you're taking people through a pitch deck, it really is, your voice is going to be bringing life to your words. So from my perspective, at least, you want to start with your voice and then move on to presentation skills if you feel that that bit is lacking. But what I do find with people when they start working on their voice is they just feel a sense of ease and more confidence. And often they find they don't really need the presentation skills. However, it really depends on what you're doing. So coming back then to my approach, for those of you that don't know, my training for really the first 10 years of my career as a voice coach was very much technically focused. It was focused on vocal function and vocal technique. How do we actually produce sound? How do we combine the 3 subsystems of voice production to get our voice out? And I trained initially as a singing teacher and then moved into working with speakers, and I started working with speech pathologists and really reading and learning as much as I could about the speaking voice. Because essentially, and this is a question I get asked a lot, you're not going to have a singing lesson if you work with me. If you come as a speaker wanting to work on your speaking voice, I will work with you on your speaking voice. I'm not going to start getting you to sing a song or do some singing exercises. Now, sometimes there are some overlaps, some little miniature overlaps, but really I sort of work with people very differently. So that's the first thing. Now, of course, if you come to me and you say that you're a singer, but you want to work on your speaking voice, I might bring a little bit more singing kind of work into it with you. But as a general rule, I don't do that. As a general rule, if you come as a speaker, I work with you on your speaking voice, in your speaking range. Just as a point there as well, that your speaking voice is really the lowest part of your singing voice. So they're not different voices. We just approach it differently. And of course, if you're having a singing lesson, there's far more demands on your voice. both from a sort of dynamic perspective, from a stamina perspective, from a melodic perspective, from a rhythmic perspective. There's just so much more going on. But even so, as a speaker, you are still a musical instrument. So I really want you to get that. Even if you're working with a tiny portion of your instrument, you are still a musical instrument. And the more you can bring that musical instrument to life when you speak, the more engaging you're going to be. And also, the better your voice will work. So as I said at the beginning, a lot of my work in the first 10 years was about vocal function and vocal technique. And one of the things that we learned was really the voice likes to move. The voice likes to have that freedom. And so often for speakers, they're speaking in a very narrow range, very limited dynamics, very limited expression. And then they wonder why their voice fatigues, why their voice feels strained, why their voice gets a bit croaky and raspy and pulls back into their throat. So we want to really maximize the full expression of your speaking voice, not only because it's going to sound more engaging, but also it is going to work better. I promise you, it will feel and sound so much better when you really access the variety in your voice. So with that said, let me just explain a little bit more then. As I said, whether you book a session as a one-off or whether you work with me across 8 months, it's fundamentally the same. But obviously, the longer I spend with you, the deeper we can go, the more I can really help you to embody this work. Because what you'll find is one session is great and it will give you some awareness and it will open your mind, hopefully, to what's possible. And maybe you are in a position to go away and practice and you don't need that support. But of course, over 8 months, I can just go so much deeper with you and really get to the root of a lot of what's driving your current vocal habits. So the very first thing I will do with any new client is I will always ask them about their voice, because I want to gauge your awareness of your voice. And this isn't a test. This isn't to kind of try and trick you. This is just so I kind of sense how much does this person really know about their voice. And maybe you don't know that you know about your voice. You know, it might be that you know more than you realize. But I'm listening to you as you're speaking. So part of it is I get you talking so I can listen to your voice. And then I will always ask you lots of questions. So anyone that's worked with me knows I ask you lots of questions. And I'm listening, obviously, to what happens to your voice, but I'm also wanting to know your awareness of your voice. So for example, and really common, is I might hear a lot of strain in someone's voice, and I might ask them how their voice feels, and they'll be like, oh yeah, it feels great. So then I know there's probably not a lot of awareness there, because that strain that I can really hear in their voice, they have got so used to it, they don't even feel it anymore. So I know that perhaps there's some work we need to do around building your own awareness and kinesthetic awareness of your voice. So that's the first thing. I will ask you lots of questions. And I'm also very interested to know what your goal is. Like, why do you want to do this? What are you hoping to achieve from this? What's your kind of ultimate goal? Now, for some people, they have a specific goal. You know, I'm speaking at a conference in 2 months' time, or I want to start a YouTube channel, or I want to start a podcast, or I'm going for a promotion, I'm interviewing at the moment, and I want to bring my best foot forward. For other people, it's really, they just want to feel more confident. For some people, it's just, I know this is holding me back in my life more broadly, and I want to feel more confident when I speak, whether it's to family, whether it's to friends, whether it's professionally, because we take our voice everywhere we go. Every single interaction we have, we are going to be bringing our voice to the table till the day we die. So it is a worthy investment as well, because this is not there's nothing wrong with luxury holidays, but it's not like a luxury holiday that you have once and then that's it. This is an investment for your life, because you take your voice everywhere. So that's the first point. I will ask you questions. I'm starting to build up a picture of your awareness, what I'm hearing in your voice. And really, I just want to get a sense of how your voice feels to you. There's no right or wrong, what you're experiencing. And then if there are particular times of day or particular events or situations where you feel your voice changes or it becomes more challenging and harder. So lots of questions to start with, which really, really helps me to then know what direction to take you in. Just before I continue, I just want to say as well that I'm talking about this today in a very linear fashion, but it's not really a linear process at all. I work very intuitively with people, and in the back of my mind, I obviously have all my technical knowledge and functional knowledge of the voice, but I'm very much responding to the person in front of me and what's going on for them in that moment. And so, I mean, an example this week, I was working with a client that had had a really stressful, emotional day. So I would work with someone that's had that a little bit differently, maybe to someone that's feeling really great and is really rested. So I will very much tailor it to you and where you're at, physically, emotionally, mentally as well. Even though in the back of my mind, I always have a goal that I'm trying to reach with you. So the next part then, after I've asked you all these questions, is I will give you an assessment of what I'm hearing. And this is based on very much my ear is tuned to your voice and what I'm hearing in your voice, but also based on what you have said to me as well. So I'm factoring in everything, and that's why I try and get you to talk for as long as possible and get you relaxed, get you talking, so I get the best possible sense of what your voice is actually really like, and then I can give you an assessment. Now, of course, that's going to vary for every single person, but I'm going to tell you what I'm hearing in your voice and where I think you need to go, what I think your voice needs emotionally. This is the next point. What I feel is holding you back emotionally with your voice. And so it's both a physical sort of, this is what we need to do physically, but this is also what we need to address emotionally. And so that's why I get you to talk. You know, I get you to talk as much as possible about your voice and your struggles and your concerns, because it helps me to really build up a picture. So it's both the physical and the emotional side. And just on the emotional side, people will say stuff without even realizing that tells me everything I need to know. You know, we say things all the time. We'll be speaking our fears, we'll be speaking our limitations without even realizing. So I'm hearing and listening to all of that. So the stories that you're telling yourself, which you'll then probably tell me, the fears that you're feeling around your voice, the situations that cause you anxiety and fear, the things that you really focus on is going to tell me a lot about what's going on emotionally for you. And again, it's all feeding into this bigger picture of why is your voice the way it is? Why have you created, mostly unconsciously, these vocal habits? And then we can begin to break free, because we're dealing with a physical instrument. So we do have to do strengthening exercises, release work. We do have to open the voice up and strengthen the voice. But we also have to address the emotional, psychological piece, because your body and your voice is driven by your mind. So the mind always comes first. Except in our society, we tend to focus on the surface. We don't really often go to the root. But when I work with you, I will be addressing both of them. And as I say, it's not necessarily a linear process, but in the back of my mind, I will always have that in the back of my mind. So the next part is the vocal warm-ups. And I will do this with everyone, because most of the people I work with have never done a vocal warm-up in their life. Even though they speak for a living and they use their voice in their business or career, most people don't do warm-ups. And so it's a 4-stage process with the warm-ups that I take people through. That sounds like a lot, but you can get it down to a couple of minutes. And this is something, regardless of who you are, we will always do vocal warm-up work, because for a few reasons. One, it's going to reduce vocal injury and vocal fatigue. So that's the first thing. So if you do speak for hours every day in whatever capacity, warming your voice up every day is going to help it function better, and it's going to reduce the risk of injury. But also, coming back to what I said earlier, your voice will work better. So when it works better, it sounds better. When it works better, you've got access to more dynamics, you've got access to more expression, to pitch variation. Your voice is just going to sound better. So we're really sort of opening the voice up when we warm it up. We're getting blood flow to the muscles in the larynx, and we are really priming it so it's ready to speak. So you can access all the colors of your voice. If you are trying to access expression in your voice, but you don't do any warm-up, it's going to be much more challenging. And also, if you are speaking for hours every day and you don't do a warm-up, you're probably going to find your voice does fatigue. It does maybe feel a bit strained, that maybe you are heavily reliant on a microphone. I've seen this so many times with people that they literally can't speak unless they have a microphone. So learning how to technically use your voice in a really powerful way is really going to serve you. And then when you have a mic, it's literally a piece of cake. And I say this to people all the time, particularly singers. Don't rely on the mic for your technique. Get your technique really solid. So whether you have a mic or not, your voice works. And then when you add a mic to the mix, when your voice is functioning really well, and then you add a mic, it is literally the easiest thing in the world. It feels like you're barely doing anything. So technique really has to come first, whether you're a singer, whether you're a speaker. So just to reiterate then, so the first thing is we will talk about your history, your goals, your concerns, your experience with your voice. I'll ask you lots of questions, and then I'll give you an assessment. And that will include both physically what I'm hearing and emotionally where I feel the blocks are, where I feel you're holding yourself back, which is then contributing to the vocal habits and the vocal concerns and struggles you're experiencing. And then we will always do a vocal warm-up. Now, depending on how long I've been working with you, it might get shorter and shorter. Some of my clients do their vocal warm-up before our session. Some of them want me to take them through it. That's all good. But either way, I will always ensure there is some kind of warm-up at the start of every session. Now, the next part is very much going to depend on your voice, what your voice needs, and the direction I feel that you need to go in based on what you've said and based on what I'm hearing. So this is the vocal development, and this is going to include exercises to potentially build strength in the voice. So if your voice is very weak and powerless, we might do more strength building. If there's a lot of strain and tension and heaviness in the voice, it might be a lot of release work. Now, not necessarily in the voice, it might be release work through the neck or the jaw or the lips or the shoulders. It could be anywhere, because this is all our instrument, this is all our vocal instrument. So that is very much going to be tailored to you and your voice, depending on what you need. If, for example, you're someone that struggles with shallow breathing, you run out of breath and you don't power your voice particularly efficiently, we might do a lot of work around getting the breath deeper, for example. We might spend a whole session on that. It really depends on what you need and what I'm hearing. But let's just call this section the vocal development section. And that will also vary if you work with me over a few weeks or months even. That will vary from week to week, because as your voice strengthens, as your voice opens, as you get more confident with what you're doing, then we can go to stage 2 and we can continue to progress in your vocal development. But for the purposes of this video, let's just call that vocal development. And then finally, it's application. So what I want to make sure is that I'm not just giving you random exercises and then you're like, okay, well, that's great, but what do I do when I speak to my boss later? Or what do I do in this meeting later? So then what I will do is show you how you can start to connect the vocal exercises that we've done into your day-to-day speaking or into your presenting. So what we'll do is start with some very specific exercises and then start to morph them into speaking so that you really get a sense of, this is how my voice could feel when I speak. And often when I'm working with people initially, because I want to make it as easy as possible for you, I don't want you thinking too much, I generally pick things for you to talk about that are very easy for you to talk about, or I will give you things to say that are very, very easy, because I don't want you focused on complicated things to talk about. I want you to focus on the application with your voice. But just to know, this is very much part of it. It's very much about, here is the vocal development section, and now how do we actually use that to enhance our voice or build our voice or strengthen our voice when we come to speak. And this bit can be tricky for people because sometimes I might get you to go to more of an extreme when you're speaking. And I might get you to practice on, if you've got kids, like practice reading to your children at night, or practice when you're speaking to the person in the supermarket. So I might give you opportunities to practice where perhaps it's less threatening, perhaps it doesn't really matter if they think you're a bit mad, because in order to change your current vocal habits and to move you towards the voice that's really possible, you have to get out of your comfort zone. And people don't want to get out of their comfort zone. Their vocal habits, however uncomfortable they are comfortable on some level. So they don't really want to get out of their comfort zone. So I will be gently encouraging you to start to adopt some of these new things in maybe your next meeting or the next conversation you're having with someone, even if it's the person in the supermarket, even if it's reading to your child at night, just to start to bridge that gap between where you were and your current habits and where you're trying to get to. But what I do want to say is you can't stay in your comfort zone and do this. There's a reason why you have created the voice that you've created, because it keeps you emotionally safe on some level. So if you want to create a more powerful, strong, expressive, dynamic voice, you're not going to feel comfortable emotionally, at least initially. You have to be willing to get outside your comfort zone. So that's a big part of it. And in my training, in all of my training around technique and function, when a client presented in a particular way, our training was very much about take them to the opposite extreme to find the middle ground. And that's kind of what you have to do. So again, I will give you things that you can do in a meeting, or, even if it's 2% shift, but we're moving the needle, we're moving you in a new direction. But just to know, your ego's not going to like it. Your ego is not going to feel comfortable about this. So you have to be prepared to get out of your comfort zone when you do this work. Because actually the physical side of it's the easy bit. The physical side of it will feel good. It's just when you then have to show up differently, because now people can hear you. Now your voice has got more power. Now your voice has got more clarity. Now there's more expression in your voice. And depending on the industry that you're in, the career you're in, maybe everyone speaks with a sort of dull, monotone voice. And then you come in and you're like, hi, my name's Anuska. They're going to be thinking, what's happened to Anuska? So it's being willing to be uncomfortable. And that's why I think at the beginning as well, one of the questions I really want to know is, what's your goal? Because if you don't have a big enough goal, you will just run back. You will just think, no, this seems a bit silly. I don't want to look stupid. You've got to have a really big why. You've got to have a really big reason for doing this, because the ego does not want you to change. The ego wants you to stay where you are in your comfort zone with the same vocal habits, even if on some level they're not serving you. Even if you feel like people talk over you, no one respects you, that maybe is still more comfortable for you than actually commanding respect, being listened to, having your opinions heard, and maybe criticized. So this is all about really leaving your comfort zone. So being willing to put some of this into practice consistently, not just one-off, but consistently. So that's just a snapshot of what you can expect. And that would be a sort of typical session. Whether I'm working with you on a one-off session or across 8 months, I generally follow that sort of structure, not necessarily in that exact order, but we're always looking at the voice physically. We're always looking at the voice emotionally. We're doing some work to release, to open, to free. And then we're trying to bring it together in a way that you can utilize in your day-to-day speaking. And also, particularly if you work with me over a longer period of time, I often also get clients to go away and journal about things, to start to become aware of the things that trigger them in their life, whether it's other people's voices, whether it's situations where there are patterns in your life that are triggering you, that you're struggling with in some way. So maybe, for example, people always talk over you and it's really annoying you. And that's a very common one actually with people that I work with. So it's really starting to then explore what's really going on there and how that's impacting my voice. So if you are interested, just as a recap, I do have a digital voice coach option, which is the cheapest way you can get personal support from me. You send me a 90-second audio, and all the links are below. And I will give you some personalized feedback in a video where I will hear your voice, I will listen to you, and I do recommend in that video that you talk about the things that you're struggling with, your challenges, but also your goals with your voice. And then I can give you as much information as possible. So that's one option. So once you send me the audio, I will listen to it to make sure I've got everything I need and I can actually give you a quality video back. And then once you've made the payment, within 48 hours, you will receive that video via WeTransfer. I also have a Reclaim Your Voice session if you want a live session with me, a 60-minute session. And again, very much like what we've talked about today, I will be working with you, meeting you where you're at. Whatever's going on, it doesn't matter. We can work on your voice at any stage. I mean, literally, unless you can't speak, I can help you at any point, even if you're feeling a bit tired or under the weather. Because it's also really important to be able to use your voice when you are sleep deprived, when you are jet lagged, when you are feeling a bit stressed or sick. How do I use my voice? So don't ever let that stop you, because it's really important. So you can book a Reclaim Your Voice session, and that you can either book as a one-off, or you could book, if you're interested in the longer Speak with Impact 8-month program, but you want to sort of try before you buy type thing. And if you do choose to continue into a longer program, you do get that session complimentary. But either way, whether you do the digital voice coach option, the Reclaim Your Voice coach option, and that's all you do, you will get enormous value. I promise you, the value people get from these sessions is huge. And it really awakens something in people. For so many of us, and I include myself, if I didn't do this work myself, we just have no idea of the power of our voice, the power that we're sitting on, and how our voice is very much reflective of what's really going on within. So when we shift how we feel about ourselves, our beliefs, our stories, about how we view ourselves, the voice starts to shift. And then when you combine that with all the physical exercise, training, and technique, the world's your oyster. So if you have any questions about anything I've talked about today, post them below, or go to my website, anuska-taylor.com, send me a message. I would love to help you. And until next week, I'll see you again.